Bill. She.
Who
Might
are
be
we
Josh.
missing? Is Councilman Johnson online?
I don't see him yet.
Recording in progress.
I can leave that on if you want. Change that, yeah.
You're gonna be talking to me in the echo voice. I'm not gonna be able to track.
And where my Heelys are. There we go. Did that take care of it? Looks like that took care
Well,
of
what
it.
time is it? It's 5:00.
Patrick? Yep. Joe?
Oh, there he is. Ninja Patrick. He snuck in without me even seeing it.
He's gone from from digital to analog.
I haven't really got it.
What the heck just happened? I just get kicked off. There we go.
You okay?
All right.
All right, I'm not gonna do that. All right, let's go ahead and start. This might, please note Councilmember Johnson's absence. I move, do we excuse his absence for tonight, although I have no reason for it.
Seconded.
Second, all right. All right, please note attendance and with the excused absence of Councilmember Johnson. With that, we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. Are there any of the individuals wishing to make public comment before the committee tonight?
Hey, just a heads up, Joe says that he's on his way, but he'll
He's
be.
on his way,
Yeah.
okay. I'll try to delay till he gets here. I don't know. All right, I don't see any hands up for public comment in the audience. Do we have anybody online? Can somebody check? Do you have any hands or anything?
See you there.
No hands.
No hands? All right, in that case, we'll move on with the rest of the agenda. First item is the approval of the minutes dated October 4th, 2022. I have no comments or revisions. Do you have any?
I didn't see anything wrong with him. I move we do it.
All right, unless there are objections, the minutes are approved as submitted. There are no objections, we move on. Let's, is there additional discuss about Agenda Bill 22-128 downtown Snoqualmie speed limit reduction? We did this at council and it's coming back through to go back again.
I'll call Patrick up. I believe we received a document from the state on state letterhead. I think I'm spilling the beans.
We'll be brief. Evening, guys.
Mayor. Yeah, so per, I think it was Councilmember Lassay, he just wanted the speed study to be a little bit more professional looking in general terms. So I had them
More formal between us and the state, but go on.
formal. So I reached out to them and essentially what they said was we can add a header and footer. So that's now added to Exhibit 3. That just has the WashDOT's standard header and footer. They can't add the title or the signature block until they sign it, which their procedure is we have to accept it as an ordinance and then their state engineer will sign it at the behest of their engineer who created the speed study. So that's about all I've got as an update for you.
We'll proceed on to council. All right, thank you.
Consent or regular?
Hmm,
Consent or regular?
irregular.
Oh, it's an ordinance.
It's ordinance, we got to, and we at least need to acknowledge your questions and answer the questions. All right, Agenda Bill 22-138, Community Center Expansion Project Alternative Public Works Contracting Options.
Good evening.
Evening.
Take this out. So when we were last here, well, backing up, I gave an introductory presentation and then subsequently Jim Dugan from Parametrics provided a PowerPoint presentation, talked about options. As I said, the next step would be to bring you a contract so that we could retain Mr. Dugan and Parametrics to assist the city with gaining state approval, the project review committee approval of the city's use of the alternative public works methodology, design build, in this case for the community center expansion. As part of that process, that approval process, they want to see that the city has the requisite technical expertise on board and experience with this process. So it's helpful to have Parametrics and Jim's experience in that, which is why you see a contract that has the entire scope of work. If the council then eventually authorizes all of the work and you hire a design builder and we get into the process. As I explained in the agenda bill, because the first two steps are getting state approval and initiating the procurement process, putting a request for design build solicitations out there. That's a $69,000 combined ask. Those are the only steps that would be initially authorized by this contract. The contract says, and the agenda bill,
Where is that limitation in the contract?
it is I believe, in the scope and timing. I'm going to try to pull this up. It indicates that the subsequent pieces of work are only authorized following a second notice to proceed that has to have council authorization before it's issued. And I put that in the contract specifically to address, I think, questions from the chair when we were last forward. Let me try to scroll down. And are you able to pull up exhibit 2, which is the contract?
I just have to scroll down to it
Or
with this new.
X2, I think, is the document.
It's one of the few times.
Sorry, right? Yeah, if you can,
The
sorry.
agenda builder did allow you to.
if you can
hyperlink the
scroll it
attachment.
so we can see the bottom of page 1 and the top of
Don't
page
go back.
2. Right there, perfect. So work commences when we issue a notice to proceed. Unless extended, and then we may issue separate notices to proceed for the tasks. But a notice may not be issued for design or subsequent tasks. Those are all the expensive ones until authorized by the Snoqualmie City Council. And if you,
Sorry. I will have it up momentarily.
so what we're trying to do is a bit of a two-step here. We want a
I know.
contract,
We only talked to one step, which is what I'm concerned.
and as I'm trying to explain, in order to get through step 1 and convince the state to approve our use of this method, we need to show the state that we have the right team on board, which includes Parametrics. So we want to have a contract that commits Parametrics to the city for soup to nuts. But we don't want to authorize them to do most of it or spend most of it until the council gives us separate authorization to proceed. Which we wouldn't ask for until after we get state approval. We would get authorization, put an RFP out for design builder. Those are the first 2 steps, the $69,000 worth that's discussed. We would then come to council for separate authorization. If you like what you see, the budget's there, the partners are there, all of those things. And Mr. Dugan can speak in a little more detail about how that process works, if that would help. Both the project review committee approval process, as well as sort of the big chunk of the work there and how that would mesh.
So Councilor Holloway. So there's 2 agenda bills. And so the one you just authorized 69,000. And it's already been budgeted for 100,000 for the community center expansion and pool for this year. So you're just. So there's
Well, no, so
138.
here's my conflict, okay? We had a discussion about let's go get a consultant to help us on alternate purchasing methods for community center.
Correct.
Okay, that's $39,000. Okay. We add it in there and let's go ahead and do the build package. That gets me to 69,000, which is 30,000 beyond what we discussed prior. What I have in front of me is a contract for 700,000 plus change for the whole project. With a clause that says, yeah, but you don't do steps 3 and on until we have council authorization on something that's in our comp plan, but has not been, it's neither a yes nor a no, it's a maybe at this stage. We have not said we're definitely going to do that. We would like to do that. It's in our CIP, but we haven't done full authorization of it.
Right. And the reason for approaching it this way under the alternative, and I'll answer this and then ask Jim to come up here, is that I believe you, the council, would not have sufficient information about the project itself, the details, the scope, the dollars, until you got answers back from a design builder and had someone ready to work through the process. So unlike the traditional, where we go and you authorize a large contract and we design it, and then we put it out on the street, and then we get bids, and then you can say yes or no. This process actually rolls the design and the construction details all into one, and you negotiate a maximum price for that while that's being finalized. So you have to get started to really be in a position to know whether you're going to go or not. And Jim, if you can kind of chime in. And so that's the reason for asking for an initial increment of 69 to go get approval, work with the Y, put a solicitation out there, and then hopefully get enough information to are you in a position to make a decision whether.
Mayor, good to see you again. Committee, there's probably a lot of questions you have that I could answer. I'll try and provide a little background on the Project Review Committee. I'm currently a member of the state's Project Review Committee, is approximately 32 members. And they hear applications from public agencies wanting to use alternative delivery for public works projects. In my 7th year, I believe, I've chaired it, vice chaired it. I'm in my 7th year, and the tenets of the state's approval to use alternative delivery are built around, do you satisfy the statute? Do you have the correct talent on your team, whether it be your own staff or augmented? And do they have capacity in their workload? And so the PRC looks to first-time users of a delivery method, be it design build or GCCM. There's also job order contracting, 3 types. And when they know you haven't done that delivery method, at least one completed project within the last 5 years, then they look to see that you have the talent on your team. All too often, sadly, some public agencies have come along and they've only presented a consultant that was there to get PRC approval. The PRC then looks to the agency and says, well, if you go forward with the project, who are you going to use? Where's the experience for the project? And in all cases where that scenario took place, the PRC did not approve the applicant's application, and the applicant had to come back and demonstrate that they had a contract in place that provided the services that are required for the duration of the project, if the project goes forward in its stages and durations. So what's before you, which is a result of best practices, is to put in place a contract agreement that releases the stages one step at a time at your discretion along the course of the project. Budget that's in that contract that is not released doesn't come to parametrics. It belongs with you. If the project ended at the end of procurement for all the other reasons that you would choose to do so, our services would end with it. It's an hourly as needed based contract that you can add, delete, cancel, fire, hire at any time for any reason to provide the expertise that it needs to do, use that delivery method with this project. It's as flexible as it gets. And I'm bringing in my office, I manage the Tacoma office. I have a team of about 14 project managers, and I've been doing this longer than all of them. And that's what's before you tonight. That's a backdrop. Now I can answer any questions that you have.
So it's currently structured this is, I don't know, 13 steps. I can't remember offhand. 13 steps to do it. 2 are authorized, remaining are authorized, but contingent upon council approval of the additional steps.
Entirely.
Okay. It much more digestible if it were authorized the first 2 steps and the remaining steps were authorized by separate action later. Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the issue I get, I went from what I thought was going to be around 40,000 to 714,000. That gives me a whole set of different questions. Was there a request for I assume this is professional services. Was there a request for qualifications? Is parametrics the best qualified in this? And against who?
I defer to Bob because this happened before I got
Okay,
here.
so I assume I'm into professional services versus like a contract.
We are in
Construction.
professional services since we're not hiring parametrics to engineer the project for us. If we were hiring an engineer to design it, we would go through an RFQ. This is I believe, a straight up professional services. So there's not a separate procurement process to follow. We know they do this work. We know Mr. Dugan is on the project review committee. We know they have the qualifications, the expertise. They know the players. They, I believe, had originally came to the city following previous two city administrators ago, Mr. Larson's introduction to parametrics at ICMA events. So it's been a while. We were this close to presenting a contract with parametrics for this work 3 years ago when the pandemic hit. So long answer to your question, but no, there was no separate proposal process, RFP process followed because it's a professional services process. We could do that if
Was it-
council wanted.
Was or wasn't a professional services contract?
It is professional services, but garden variety, using air quotes, professional services contract, lawyer services, accountant, forensic accounting, any of those types of things are not subject to a procurement process under state law. So city administrator staff can select who they believe is the best, and if it's a contract that comes to council, bring it to council, or present it to the mayor or city administrator under their authority, depending on the dollar amount. But it's not the same as, for example, architect engineering, landscape architect contract, where we'd follow an RFQ process. So
But I would say, again, at 700,000, I would still fall back that even though this is not covered under the state options, the state options are still pretty good of find the best qualified or do the bid process and find the best qualified bid. But we didn't do that.
correct, because we are not required to. We were trying to get the expertise, hit the timeline, get state approval, put the city, the council, the administration in a position of getting more information, working with the Y, so that you can decide whether you're moving forward or not. Because there's a whole host of steps that have to follow. There's been conversation about advisory ballot. If you're doing that, you're going to have to hit timelines. You will need more design detail, cost numbers for all of those things.
no
And that if,
regular.
right, and that if we're using this process, we can't do any of that until we first get state approval to use the process, which, as Mr. Dugan was explaining, requires us to demonstrate some extra expertise, bandwidth, and the right team. So again, I know it's very different from the traditional process. And I can see the chairs
But I get.
Skepticism,
I can't take Mr.
perhaps.
Dugan is
But-
a kind third party advising me impartially of how this ought to work and everything else. He's the bidder. He can't be impartial unless he's figured out ways to partition brains that I haven't figured out. Okay, so all right, do you have, I want the
Yeah,
other
I got a question.
chair.
Mr. Dugan, who's your biggest competition? What's the best company that does this that you could
Probably in the
justify?
order of the most frequent we compete with to the least, Olympic Associates out of Seattle, Vanner, Hainline, Cummings. Once in a while, Green Gasaway Architects out of Federal Way, even fewer times KBA out of Olympia. Another
Who's the
smaller
best
one.
of them?
He is.
Well, I frequently compete with Olympic associates and we have a pretty similar win-loss record. The two of us, they have probably a good half share of what's in the state as opposed to us. They've got a team of about 130, 140. I've got a team of 14, so we don't compete on as many projects as they do, but highly regarded. They keep our pencils pretty sharp.
Yeah. And why should we go with you instead of them?
Well, we're one of the two top best firms in the state. Either one would be fine. Actually, I was even going to say if the idea of contracting for the life of the project with the ability to segment it one phase at a time was something that you couldn't get past, I would recommend that you don't go for state approval for using alternative delivery, because unless you can demonstrate that, the PRC will not approve you. Doesn't have to be us. It could be any one of those other firms, and especially anyone with Olympic associates. But spending $39,000 for step one just to fail would be a foolish thing to do, in my opinion. Been there too many times. We have 100% success rate, 100% success rate of getting applications approved by the PRC. We haven't missed since we started more than 15 years ago. It's a remarkable record, and that's part of the answer to your question. That comes because of learning, understanding how the statutes are written. 3910 was recently sunsetted and then was revived, and there were changes to the code that were pretty significant for the delivery methods, and understanding the nuances of those changes is how you compete. It's not how you compete. It's how you submit and present to the project review committee in the language that works within the statutes and that they understand. Using alternative delivery is not a panacea. It's not just something that someone can pick up and do. It's like a hammer or a nail or a saw. Those are just tools. You use them wrong and what you're doing fails. Delivery methods don't fail. The people using them fail. And the public agencies that, not that you do, but the public agencies that believe that they can on their own fail all too often. They're complex, difficult to use. And the nuances in the statute itself, how it's written, is easy to read and understand. It's what isn't said in the statutes and how you use it within the law, including but not limited to making sure you have outside legal counsel to keep Bob in line. How you use the talent that's in the contract documents that outside firms have used for alternative delivery for the past 2 decades. There's a lot of nuances to it. Jim Dugan isn't here to tell you that parametrics should be hired in lieu of anybody else. But you need somebody with our skills, and Olympic Associates is another firm that does it. Steve Murakami is a vice president with their firm. Worked with him on many times, had them work with me. I've worked underneath them. Extremely talented firm. But having said that, we competed a few years ago to be here for this project, and actually went through a pretty significant scrutiny at that time and presented before council on the alternatives, pros and cons, and ultimately got right up to the last step before it went on hold for a lot of reasons. Some were your own and the rest were all out there in the marketplace. We've stayed in touch over the years on purpose because we thought the project mattered a lot and we didn't want to go away if there was an opportunity to stay and finish the work that we originally competed for. There's a little bit of cheerleader stuff in there, but bigger projects aren't better projects. Difficult projects that are community-based that matter a lot and are really fussy and have lots of parts and pieces and multiple partners. How the why fits into this in the delivery method where they've been working with a builder already versus, and that they just can't bring along on their own. They still have to compete, but we can write the RFQ and the RFP in a way that incents GLY's ability to be able to compete if that's who I wanted or whoever it was. The flexibility within the statute gives us the ability to write the rules on how to bring before you the right players to manage the risk in the business for a fussy project.
Speak a little to what additional information would the council would have about the project if they not only get approval, but go through the procurement process. Solicit.
I mean, relative to the design builder?
Yeah.
Imagine you had a project. Let's say Bob was our design builder and I looked at Bob and said, I've got a budget of X and a program of Y. And at no certain time, if you don't add scope, or if the dirt that I'm building on isn't a problem, then at no point in time do I want to see a design that isn't on budget. Ever. Imagine that you could say the inclusion goals that we have, I'll just say they're the state's goals, 10, 6, and 5. If those were mandatory minimum requirements, you can make that a requirement of your design builder, because under state law, they don't have to procure every single bid package and take the lowest responsive bid. They can procure bid packages that meet your inclusion goals. So the flexibility that comes with using design build is twofold. One, it helps protect your risk to a greater extent than the other delivery methods. And two, it allows you flexibility to impose other values that matter to you upon your design builder at the risk of their contract. I think I'm in my 5th decade, which is hard to believe, actually. But in the last 5 years alone, in about 15 different progressive design build contracts that we have administered for public agencies, we've been able to dial in the cost of doing design and construction with 2017 bond cost per square foot in 2020, 21, 22, and we've got one we just went to GMP on for 23. So remember, you've got arguably between 8 and 12% cost increases in the year. It's almost 1% a month. So imagine 4 years later, you could still do the same project for the same money from 4 years ago. And the reason you can is because you used a delivery method that allows you to impose that risk on your design builder and have them do the risk mitigation. Have them find the roof type and the siding and the equipment that fits within your budget. And not a design team that doesn't actually have a dog in the hunt. Design bid build, the design team, when they're done with their design, they're done. But a design builder is responsible for their design when they build it, and they're responsible fiscally for it. Those are just a few of the things that come with a design builder. GCCM, which is another method, is the same contracting method as design bid build. You still carry a design contract and you still carry the construction contract, which means you warrant the design. If the design's failed, the contractor sues you. You have the right to go back to your design team if you so choose. But the design team has no dog in the hunt as it relates to your builder. In design build, you hire a team that is led by a design build, a general contractor, and that general contractor brings the design team. So if there's any errors and omissions or problems within those design documents, they don't belong to you. It's a significant difference. 20 years ago, most public agencies were moving away from design bid build to GCCM. And since 2013, when the market just stood on its heels and costs were just out of control, the lion's share of them have moved to design build for this reason. At the project review committee level, we used to have 80% of a year's applications be GCCM, and now those are all design build for this very reason. This very reason. So hopefully, did I answer enough pieces of that?
When you finish the procurement, what information do you have about the design builder's pricing?
Oh, yeah. So the statutes are fairly flexible around the procurement process of your design builder. It always includes a statement of qualifications, much like you see with most contracts. It includes proprietary interviews, which you score separately. And the pricing exercise, we actually require them to give us what their percentage of fee will be against the anticipated construction contract amount at the time of competition. So you have applicants that will provide a fee range that might be 3% by one applicant, 4.25% by another, and 8% by another. And so with that information in mind, you score accordingly. And you know what your pricing structure is before you select your design builder. And I'll repeat this, unless there's a force majeure of some kind that's in the contract, unless there's something wrong with the dirt or the building, if it's existing, that you're giving them to work on, and unless you add scope of work, then they're bound by that fee percentage in the competition and to perform against that program and on that schedule with no additional fees.
And that's the reason that I proposed including not just the 39,000 for the PRC approval, but the procurement process, so that you could solicit a design builder and have that information in hand, including the builder's fee percentage that Mr. Dugan was just describing. So at that point, the council you would have your anticipated price plus the winning design builder's fee, and you would know, all right, this is the dollar amount. And so can we, the council and the Y and school district and the potential other players, are you in a position to say, yes, let's go, no, let's not? And so it seemed, rather than just doing a one step, make more sense to do a two step and deliver you information that you could use and base a decision.
Councilman Johnson.
Thank you for all that.
Sorry, that's the 69.
Mhm.
Seemed a relatively limited next step to get you along.
So I want to make sure that I understand exactly what the purpose is of these three different numbers. We've got the 30,000, which is to simply get the PRC submitted, correct? All the way to approval?
Right up to, so it's an application that submits, and approximately 4 or 5 weeks later is a presentation, and they take action on it on the day of presentation.
Okay, and then the 39,000 is for other things that are important to the process, but do we need, is the idea that we would need to fund the 39,000 so that we have more evidence to present in the PRC to say, yes, we can actually achieve these goals? So essentially, if we didn't do the 39,000, is it more likely that it would be denied by the state?
It's a good question. I'm going to unpack that just a little.
Yeah.
If we're under contract for the project and you release only the first step until we have approval, and then release the second step immediately upon approval, and then if approved, release the third step when that second one is done, you could take it in those chunks. I don't see any risk with the PRC as long as there's evidence that you have the skill set on board for the project. If you were to only hire us to do just the first step with no evidence that there are other steps, I would probably decline the opportunity. I don't want the blemish on my record of failing at the PRC.
Fair enough.
Doesn't that step two, the design build team, answer the question of, do you have the right skills on board to make this project successful?
In the choosing of a design builder,
Well, in the PRC considerations, you're saying one of their criteria is, do
Yes.
you have the proper skills and resources to make this happen?
Yeah.
And isn't that step two in part getting some of those skills and resources in line?
they are. But it's the next question.
That's kind of help, yeah.
The next question, the right question to ask is, where is the evidence to the PRC that you have retained that skill set for the life of the project?
Right.
That's what the PRC is going to be looking at, because they already know that you don't have it.
Safe assumption.
Okay, so then the additional 600,000 is for these other activities that are necessary to get the project moving. So I'd heard a comment somewhere earlier that we thought we were going to be spending 30,000 up front, and then it ends up being 700,000. And maybe I just was mishearing that
No,
comment.
I said that.
So I'm wondering, was there ever an expectation that we would get all of these things for $30,000? Or is the expectation that we would have to ultimately end up spending the 700,000-ish for these various items?
I think initially, and especially if we're talking several years ago, we didn't talk about what the entire scope of work would be. We were just talking about trying to get state approval. And when I mentioned the 30 some and change, and I don't know if it can go to the scope, if we've got those reversed, is it 39?
It's
for
reversed.
the-
It's 39.
It's 39 for PRC approval. It's 30 for the design builder procurement. That's what.
Okay.
That's what I
Well,
was
my
going by
apologies, I've
memory,
got it.
right?
It's probably
So-
came in late.
Um, Right. So no, we never thought we were going to get $700,000 worth of work for 30. That was, we just weren't talking about this level of detail. And it really was when we started to think through the approval process and what was going to be needed, while also wanting to address the concerns of not overcommitting the city to spend that. How do we show the state, the PRC, that we have the expertise without committing to spend that? My attempt was in the description of the notices to proceed. There could be other things we could add to the contract if it would help the council be comfortable, but the rationale is, you know, as Jim stated, A, to convince the PRC, and B, step two, to get the council more information about what the total cost is of the project, so that, which is key, you'll be in a better position to decide whether you're proceeding, and especially if there's still an interest in doing any kind of ballot measure, you're going to want that information about total cost. Yesterday, last month.
So then. Yes. The last little bit here is how we're funding these three tiers. The first two are from the 2021-2022 biennial budget, so that shouldn't be a problem. So sorry,
It's terrible.
smoke. Yeah, it's getting me here. So sorry. Okay, but then the 645,000 is from the 2023-2024 biennial budget, which has not been passed. So those funds don't technically really exist, or they haven't been appropriated. That's a better way to say it. They haven't been appropriated. Sure. Personal.
Well,
Yeah,
those
so-
subsequent steps aren't authorized till notice to proceed.
Correct.
Right.
Additionally, there's a 14-day termination clause.
Okay, so what I was concerned about is that I think the council members who are not even here have expressed concern about when we say that we're going to spend money for the 2023-2024 budget, which doesn't exist yet, or at least hasn't been approved yet. So there's that clause that the council needs to say, okay, now this goes into effect, then that would occur hypothetically after we have approved a budget. Is that correct?
It's not going to happen. Notice to proceed can't happen until we have PRC
Right.
approval,
Right.
which isn't going to be until January.
Right.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
timing on having a
So-
budget in place where, say, we appropriate 15.2 million to or whatever it ends up being that's in the community, the non-utility capital fund. If that ends up being more than $645,000, then the appropriation would exist for it in the budget.
In fact, the application deadline is in mid to late December.
December
So
20.
There'll be a budget adopted before even the application is finalized.
And the presentation to the PRC, I don't have the date specific, but it's like January 23rd or January 24th.
Okay,
And you don't have approval from them until that day.
Thank you.
The part that I think is the most important, not to say that what you're saying isn't important, but to me, what I would be looking at is how we write the RFQ and the RFP for the procurement process, because it needs to have language that says this project is only going to go a certain to the design builder, a certain distance, and funds may not be appropriated. We'll put that right in the competition right up front so that everyone knows it might just vaporize. We should write in there that there will be pre-construction services. So as soon as someone's under contract for about a 2-week period of time to validate your scope and cost information that you have right now, that may not actually be accurate. It may be numbers that came from 2 years ago and not be applicable at all. You need, in my opinion, you need somebody to vet that in the real marketplace so that if it is something that you want to fund, then you have confidence in the numbers and you can plan it for your budget and you can put it in the right cycle. And the RFQ that we'll write for the design builder will have them on hold, which frankly, in today's business, which there's more work than there are companies, being on hold is crazy to even say those words. But some projects require this kind of approach. And what we're talking about here tonight is not new by any means for projects that come with especially multiple biennium fundings. And we have to stop and start as you approve, with the risk of it dying at any given minute, like it did before. Actually. And then it just goes away. So managing that on our side is difficult to do, but managing your risk by writing the RFQ and the RFP process correctly gives you the full freedom to do as you choose without encumbering funds that you don't release. None of that budget belongs to parametrics that you don't release. None. Until you release it, and then I'm held to it. And if I don't spend it, it doesn't belong to me.
Right, and it's a time and materials
Yeah.
billing basis anyway, so we've got budget numbers in there for tasks, but it's gonna be on an hourly basis as they do the work. Not, oh, we authorize task 4, now write a check for 150,000. That's not how this contract is.
You okay? Haven't
Yeah,
checked it?
I'm tracking.
Like, I needed to check it.
All right, then the last thing for me then is, are there any other, are there $30,000 worth of work to prepare for this project we expect to spend out of the 2021-2022 budget?
The budget question.
We have 100,000, right? And we're spending roughly 70,000 of it. Are we expected in the next few months to spend another 30,000?
I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we were to spend an additional amount from that, I just want to make sure that it stays as close to the 100,000 as it can. And if it needs to go over, then we'll have a different conversation at that point, I guess. But right now, we're at least in budget. That's what I care about.
So this is time and material with an estimate for step 1 of 30,000, step 2 of 39,000. Is there a not to exceed clause?
Yes.
I believe, yeah. Yeah.
We just had it on the screen.
It's a 714, but there's also a clause in there, I believe it says you can shift money between, isn't it?
It should be.
Not in the contract,
On the con-
their letter. We will plug the tasks into the contract.
I'm certain those words existed in our proposal. Just not certain that to sit in the contract. We routinely have a ceiling of what we're proposing in an hourly basis, and that if for any reason we think that that's going to change for some reason, we tell you well in advance and have a chance to talk about it. It could be market conditions. It could be that the very equipment that we're hoping to go after, that supply chain collapsed and we've got to pull something from France instead of from Georgia. You know, lots of things can happen, but you have full flexibility in how you move those things around, stop it, start it, prove it, not approve it, each step. Yep. Just good questions.
You have any more questions, Commissioner Benson?
No. No, this makes
So
sense.
you've
to me.
convinced me we're doing the right thing. I still have questions if we're doing it the right way.
Fair enough.
Having said that, I do want to see the prior negotiation we had, which you participated in which we had you competing with several other people for the community center last time. And you came out on top. So if you guys can dig that data up for me, I'd like to see it. So at least I can stand before the council and said there was a competition years ago. Showing this as the best qualified contractor or supplier or consultant, however you want to phrase it. And we've continued that engagement. And then we can get into the discussion of why it's structured the way it is and different things. Because I'm sure there will be questions come council. Are you okay to move this on to council?
Yeah, I like this idea. I've had experience of seeing project go sideways because of that disconnect between the designer and the builder. And
Oh, yeah.
if we can get rid of that, let's do that. This makes sense. I say we move it forward.
I'm not proposing consent.
No,
Probably not.
I assume there'll be discussion.
And I will do the historical research. I was not part of a process.
I probably was, but I don't remember.
So I don't remember exactly what's there. I will unearth that.
Okay.
that process and include it in a revised agenda bill.
And I will try to structure my life to take Friday afternoon off and come down and talk to you guys, okay? If you're available, that'd be time for us to discuss. Okay. Thank you. All right. Go back up to the agenda. At that stage, we're into biennial budget.
Yes. You
So
want to start?
sure, if you don't mind, I'll kick it off. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, for having me here today. Just to give a little bit of a background, we had a previous budget workshop take place last Monday. And so right now, what we're going through is we're actually going back a little bit to the committee rounds that you had the first time for the most part, because we have some additional presentations to give you regarding the Parks and Public Works Department. We actually completed 1 out of 6 of the total presentations for the department. So we've got Mike here who's prepared to kind of go through some of that material. After that, we're happy to entertain your questions. We are scheduled to have a third kind of committee round session as well with the Parks and Public Works Committee itself. And so we're not able to get through it this period as well. We can certainly slide some of those presentations into the next phase in November, early November for the most part, or we can certainly finish all those presentations today and then answer your questions as best as possible at that next kind of committee round session. What you have as a part of your agenda packet is the proposed biennial budget agenda bill itself. As a component to that, you'll find an ordinance now. So we have actually drafted the ordinance. It's before you. And I believe that pretty much describes this. The next time that council will collectively and collaboratively get together, all 7 of you, is November the 1st. So that's roughly not next week, but the week after that. So with that said, I'm going to let Mike take it away. I can certainly share my screen, Mike, and
I got it. I'm ready. I'm just
Okay.
wondering where they want to go.
Didn't we decide, what did we decide last time that we want to look at next?
We did fleets and facilities. There's nothing really exciting in there. I think the meeting after this is the exciting meeting for fleet. So
It's all exciting, Mike.
if you'd like to talk about engineering or the wonderful world of stormwater, or we have,
That's what we were gonna talk about stormwater.
you want to talk about stormwater?
Wasn't that?
Let's
wasn't
talk
that
about
what you wanted to
stormwater.
Go off. Yeah.
Is that working?
Yep.
It's working. Good. So as part of this budget, my recommendation is to actually create a new division out of Public Works. And that would be stormwater and urban forestry. In your last budget, you took urban forestry and placed it within the utility system because state, that's how the state set up the funding for that purpose. And their mission and stormwater align very well together. Currently, there was some stuff that occurred at the last budget meeting where duties got transferred. And then nothing ever happened in our world. We didn't change the job description. We didn't inform the individual that he had new responsibilities. We didn't, there's a lot of stuff that didn't happen. So really, there was nobody minding the store on that topic. We need to have a supervisor responsible for stormwater that we can hold accountable for performance of the stormwater. Patrick over there is doing an incredible job getting us on our feet. He and Kevin Halbert have been knocking it out of the park the last 2 months to get us where I can sleep again. But it's my strong recommendation that we set up this division. As part of this request, there is an additional stormwater utility maintenance position being requested. The supervisor position, I'm recommending to take the funding from the maintenance operations manager position that was never filled last budget cycle and use that funding to cover the supervisor position. And then the additional position, I believe, was in the works, correct? Yeah.
Utility rate study.
It was in the
So-
rate study. So it was already a planned position. So that would give us 2 stormwater positions, and it gives us 2 urban forestry positions and a supervisor. Now we have a crew of 5 on 2 of our critical missions. And that's my recommendation. So in the last budget, urban forestry and stormwater positions provide continuous operations throughout the pandemic. The Park Avenue revetment repair was completed. The Delta Newton Infrastructure Rehabilitation Project was completed. 156th Street and 156 street and park trees were planted, including complete tree replacement on Stellar Way. Over 1,000 volunteer hours with the Green Snoqualmie Partnership were held, and that much work was put into our urban forest. And they've inspected and provided maintenance to approximately 600 of our, I don't know how many storm drains we have. We have a ton. 3,400. So that's the scope of the battle we're fighting. There's 3,400 different boxes that we have to inspect and clean out and keep track of, not to mention all the ponds, et cetera.
But to your point, we have had no stormwater issues over the last 2 months. So well done.
Oh, thank you. Budget's on the screen. This is your part of the show.
I think that was the joke. And maybe cracking from dehydration.
So I guess in essence, I have a part of this show as well to get into. So you are seeing some pretty, I guess, sizable increases between 2022, which we've estimated that you see here as a part of your overall table in comparison to 2023 and 2024. And that largely reflects the staffing changes overall in the stormwater maintenance fund itself. So with that said, we also have the charges for goods and services, which incorporates the utility rates that you see there that we have scheduled for 2023 and 2024, but also as a component of the utility rate study, there are growth projections that were included as a part of that too. The charges for goods and services that you see here are pulled directly from the utility rate model itself. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Mike for the next slide.
So we've been going through a in-depth organizational review out there. This is my #1 priority, is to get this stuff set up. It's where I feel that we have the most exposure. It's those 2 new positions. We will be beginning the River Walk and the Sandy Cove Banks stabilization projects this year. We will be completing additional drainage improvements and repair. We have the Kimball Creek Restoration Project, which we have partners that we're working with. And our next street to replace all the street trees on is Autumn Ave. Add to that all the other little projects that we got going on. We're starting work on the storm ponds. We took care of Swords and Storm Pond last week or the week before, 2 weeks ago. And they're in Kenzie Storm Pond this week. So we're getting back to the storm ponds with the labor source that you folks provided a few meetings ago. So things are moving forward, and we're going to get this under control.
Okay, so none of the slides. So let me ask my question then. So I understand putting a stormwater and urban forestry supervisor position, offsetting that cost by another position that was not filled. And the other add without offset is a stormwater maintenance position, correct?
Which was planned. So it's in the fees to collect that money. So I would say it does have an offset.
Okay, I won't argue that. So for that additional head, what are we getting? part of it is you're somewhat a victim of your own success. And he's right. Stormwater has been no issues. We're doing pretty well. Forestry, no issues. We're actually getting to some of those trees and getting replaced. Phil's doing a great job. So what more needs to be done that added head will be working on, or that added statement of work will help us?
Well,
get?
we're required to inspect and maintain half of the storm basins each year annually. We've gotten to 600 of them this year.
Yeah, so you're one.
That's not half.
Yeah.
So the additional productivity is needed. Additionally, with Phil, oftentimes other departments have to supplement his team if they're doing large tree removals. I mean, even the fleet supervisor was out there one day helping take down a dangerous tree, because that's all we had available to supplement. Having a larger team will prevent that. Fleet could stay in fleet, and the tree folks can take care of the trees. I'm not asking for a resource that is not needed. Additionally, we need to be running the street sweeper too. We haven't done that, and that gives me a body I can put in a street sweeper.
Great cheaper in quite some time. Sorry, Councilman Nelson.
Yeah, I think that what concerns me is the ending fund balance keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm worried that if we were to project forward, I don't happen to have that, maybe it exists somewhere else, but I don't have it right in front of me. If we're to project forward to a likely budget for 2025, 2026, does the ending fund balance keep getting smaller? And then what happens when the ending fund balance gets to zero? So I guess eventually my ultimate question is it sustainable moving forward as a spending level?
So in essence, that is a question that we would address through a new utility rate study for the most part, which is actually a component to the overall enterprise system funds that we're proposing as a part of this budget overall. That is a fantastic question, and that's something that hopefully we would address through that. One of the things that you're seeing here is a pretty substantial transfer out. That is a transfer out that is going into the utilities capital fund itself. There is a possibility that we might be able to pull back on some of those funds that are going over to the utilities capital fund. We do know pretty much that we are going to start with roughly a $20 million beginning fund balance in the utilities capital fund. And you don't really see that utilities capital fund itself drop. And I know you were checking out those two charts because again, I've got eyes from here. For the most part. Yeah. Or below, even $6 million by 2028 itself. So there's a possibility that we could pull back on that and while still and maintain our sufficient reserves, for example. At the same time, that fund balance could drop a little bit in the utilities capital fund. Maybe it's not 6 million, maybe it's 5 million, for example. So there's some trade-offs in there in order to kind of balance it out over time and smooth it out. But yeah.
And kind of building right off of that is, I don't know if we want to jump forward. I guess I could wait till we get to the utilities capital fund. I'll wait till we get there.
Councilman Vincent?
I guess my question is, to what extent were those ending fund balances artificially high because we were understaffed?
Well, generally in the past, we would try to budget for exactly how much staff we were anticipating, right? For the most part. So to the extent in which we've had vacancies in stormwater, that would increase the cash balances that we would have within that itself. But yeah, they have been in stormwater, especially pretty significantly high, just because we haven't staffed up fully to where we have budgeted for and incorporated into the utility rate model in the past. And now we're starting to do that with this budget cycle.
There's a certain comfort to having a big ending fund balance, but at the same time, if we're just always running enormously high ending fund balances, we might be overcharging. So
it's not for me to get philosophical, but I like to put the money to work, right? For example, and if we don't necessarily need the money, or if we're not prepared to put the money to work, then
what are we charging?
Whose
people
pocket
for?
should it go into?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fair point because, we could decide, well, why don't we just reduce our staff instead of adding staff and then build up a big fund balance, right? In which case, yeah, why are we charging so
I
much?
think we're
And I'm
seeing,
sure
we're seeing.
there's probably laws about what you can
Have
do with
to
that,
Keep in
but
mind that we've got mandates, right, that we have
yeah,
to meet by the
exactly.
Department of
Yeah,
Ecology and all that.
exactly. Yeah, I'm sure there are laws about it, but at any rate, I think it's just that for us, we need to figure out what the balance is to whatever we're allowed to do, obviously. But I guess what I'm saying is if we go to a spending level that is unsustainable moving forward, that's when we run into a problem.
Right.
So
Right.
your point is very well taken.
Yeah.
It's just finding that balance.
One other thing that, in my opinion, should be thought of and discussed when we're talking about adding positions or even taking away positions.
Didn't mean
is-
to actually suggest taking away positions.
I get it, but that's the line of business we're in, and someday we may get there. But there is a wear and tear factor on the staff. And if you constantly are understaffed and you constantly are punching above your weight,
Right.
eventually you wear out.
Amen.
I do have an absenteeism problem in my department. And part of it is because of staffing levels. There are other reasons and we're working on the other reasons. But always kind of keep that, I would encourage you to keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through this. And asking one person to take care of stormwater system is complicated and involved in this. That's way beyond. The state, they're not taking any of the rules off the books.
Yeah.
They have teams of people that just add rules every year. And they are draconian in the penalties if we get sideways. Significant fines. I mean, real money fines. And it's definitely a pay now or pay later situation.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to get there. I've been there at a previous place. Through no fault of my department, but a co-department, and I've seen it go down and it's bad. So that is why this is my focus. This is where I identified our exposure, and that's why I'm making this request.
Sure. Yeah, this doesn't seem like it's just a Parks and Public Works problem. It feels like we're hearing a lot across the city staff that we're just putting a lot of mileage on people, and you gotta change the oil every now and then, maybe bring in another one. This makes sense.
But also to reflect to some of your comments, we, the council, set the rates. And we can set them when we want to. Or for how long we want them, and I'm not suggesting that, just if we were to get into a condition of a huge reserve fund, which we shouldn't get into, but if we were to get that, there could be consideration of holding off on rate increases to let that kind of push that out, or actually going back and changing the rates, but that we are responsible to the citizens for the rates we charge them for these utilities. Okay, Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, so then what I'm hearing is that the reason that we haven't had problems could be because we're just loading up our staff with work, and the bottom might fall out at some point without some staffing changes.
I cannot tell you how incredible the people that work in my team are. I mean, they are outstanding. And I will tell you that every day if you give me an opportunity. And they're getting tired.
So then I guess it's just that trend that's just something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, something to keep in mind is that $475,000 that you see roughly there is greater than our reserve target, which is, I believe, I don't want to put it, but it's above the 30%. We're actually the 90 days out of 365, whatever that translates into in terms of percentage. It is above that even in 2024. So.
3 out of 12, be 25%. But anyway. Added in there.
Yeah. So then in 2 years, when we come back to do 2020, 5/2026, is that the right number? Yes. If it looks like this trend is continuing to go down, then we look at a rate study to compensate. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily overspending. It could be that at that point, inflation's happening, whatever it is, we'd have to do a rate hike.
Right.
And just curious, is a rate study required to do a rate hike or just a good idea so that we can justify the rate hike?
I would not recommend doing one without.
Right. So it's just so you can
Could.
justify. Yeah.
You could,
Right, but you don't want to.
but I would never recommend one of my councils to go that route.
It would not be a strategy that staff would recommend. to this
Right. Okay. I just wanted to know.
It's a very highly technical endeavor, basically for finance, and we're pretty much generalists here. And so you do need kind of a dedicated specialist to look into what should that rate be set for the residents, for example, overall per consumption, and all this that goes on. So they do assess a lot of different variables are in play when it comes to that. So.
And major functions for your utility functions, your stormwater, your water and your sewer. A lot of those major expense increases are coming from new regulations that are being installed. So it's not just inflation that causes pressure on that.
In NPDES 2, if I get the
Correct.
alphabet
The
soup right,
gift that keeps on giving.
is pretty draconian. And if we do get any conditions and we get a fine, they're usually punitive versus just recuperative.
$10,000 a day.
Yeah.
Is kind of the opening bid.
They make sure you learn your
Per
lesson.
per violation.
Yeah, per violation.
Yep. Okay. Alright. Do you have the other one held?
Which one would you like to go to now?
We got
You want to
water,
stay in
wa-
utilities and hit water or?
Yeah, let's stay in utilities. Water. No, actually waste comes for water alphabetically, but whatever.
Come on, computer. There we go. So our water department is small but mighty. They're smaller than your IT department. Their accomplishments were to provide continuous operations and services throughout the pandemic with no issues. I mean, yeah, we had water lines break, but they fixed them immediately, et cetera. The Park Avenue revetment repair was part of the water project. There was a new water line that was installed in that. Also at the Delta Newton. And then during the Tree Streets project down here, they did a water main replacement also. Their budget is here on this page.
So in essence, it's the same sort of kind of story that's been told quite a bit with these slides. You will see pretty significant large percentage changes, largely because we've had vacancies in 2022. In addition, we're also proposing a position, which Mike will get to here shortly as well. And a lot of that explains some of those percentage increases you see for uses. In terms of the charges for goods and services, like I suggested, the stormwater, same is true. It's the utility rate increases the council's adopted May 2021, plus in addition to that, an assumption for growth that was built into the utility rate model too. So we are not deviating from what the forecast was in the utility rate model when estimating our utility fees for 2023 and 2024.
You want me to go back to that? Okay. So in the new position that's recommended, the other new position is in water. It's also a planned new position. The water master plan identified that we were deficient with the number of operators. So we are slowly bringing that up. And this is the planned year to bring one of them in. We have the source of supply improvement project that Jeff is doing. And then we'll be doing booster station improvements throughout the system. And then there's a litany of other projects that you're aware of in the CIP, and then the other things that spring up like one today. So they are a busy bunch.
same question, as Councilman Johnson had last time, ending fund balance. Seems to be quickly going.
Is it the same 25% that we're supposed to maintain in the ending fund balance for this one?
Yeah, yes, and we are. So we do make sure to check what our reserve target would be for this, and $920,000 is greater, I believe, than the $700,000 that 90 divided by 365 would get us.
So
The 90
700,000 is
Roughly the,
what
yes,
we're expected to maintain.
yes, or that we need to, in order to maintain an adequate operating reserve.
So
for
we're
this fund.
way over that this year.
At least
15%.
yeah, it's pretty substantial. And, like I mentioned earlier, the transfers out also adds to that. Yeah.
Wait,
Mhm.
where are we seeing 15%? I'm looking at this year. Our
it
ending
15%?
fund balance is estimated at
So I
1.6.
believe what we have in the financial management policy is 90 days divided by 365, right, for the enterprise funds itself.
Oh,
And
I
so
see.
whatever
Okay.
percentage that
Yes.
translates into, which Councilmember Holloway could very well be right with that. So yeah.
But assuming it's 25 or 25% of that number, right?
Well, if you have to take out the transfers out. So the transfers out itself don't necessarily qualify as an operating expense. It's just money that's moving. So.
And I did neglect to let you know that there is one piece of equipment that I'm recommending to purchase in this department this next fiscal year, and that would be a valve turning machine. Currently, our staff is out turning all the valves manually. And that is not only dangerous, but it puts a lot of mileage on staff. So this is a small machine that they pull up, and it uses hydraulics to actually exercise the valves. A lot less wear and tear on our staff. And I've actually had in my previous utility a situation where an employee was working a key and a pressure surge came through the system, and it forced the key back the other way, and it tweaked the back, and we wound up with a major workers' compensation situation. So that is another exposure that I identified that I would like to close that loop so that we do not have any opportunity for our staff to get hurt. Yes, sir.
When are you planning on getting that?
In 2023.
Is there any way, I mean, is there anything that we can do to get that included in this year? I mean, it looks like there's an ending fund balance this year that might have room for that. That's terrifying if guys are just out there with a pipe wrench doing something that a machine should be doing.
Well, it's a big welded T, but
Well, whatever it
Yeah.
is, I'm not one of those guys.
I understand.
I work with 3-year-olds all day. But that sounds terrifying.
That sounds terrifying.
There are reasons why Mike hasn't been sleeping very well.
So how do we, there's got to be an emergency expenditures kind of thing that they can access for that sort of thing.
How much is it?
It's about 80,000. Maybe 89. I can't remember exactly right now.
The flip side, been turning valves for, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, it sounds like people have been turning valves a lot and we're putting a lot of mileage on them.
Understood, but I don't think there's hard to say, bad thing to say, but I'll say it anyway.
I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm trying to.
Well, I'm
explain-
alarmed.
I'm trying to explain all the details why I'm requesting this piece of equipment.
Thank you. Curious, kind of jumping between funds because that's what this is. Do the transfers out for the for water operations, sewer, and what's the other one? Stormwater all basically add up to the transfers in for the utility capital program? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I thought that was the case.
Yeah, the only way the building pay for.
Utilities.
Food, rent,
Utilities.
food,
Yep.
I'm gonna go back to this. I don't know if an agenda bill needs to be written or something to get that sooner rather than later. But that sounds like a safety issue. We're already understaffed. And if we lose somebody to a water pressure surge, I'm gonna be pissed off. as I'm sure the whole city will be. So there's got to be some kind of way for us to take care of something like that sooner rather than later.
I'll circle back with the administration in the morning and we'll get something moving.
We can come back with a proposal.
That would be great.
I don't wanna preempt your judgment. You guys think it warrants it?
It sounds scary to not have.
I think it warrants it personally. I was shocked to find out we did not have one.
Fork opener, and I don't know.
Yeah, but you're not between the two things, so you're not.
Well, I could really confuse you by telling you there's a vacuum on it too.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Sometimes you have to clean dirt debris out of the top of the valve and you don't want to just throw that out where the cars are driving.
We will include a
Yeah,
we
include
include
video.
a demonstration next year's Public Works tour.
Before and after.
I'd love more discussion on Bernoulli's law, but
Picture one of them.
Not a problem.
I'm no physics
Probably
teacher. but-
YouTube video. Okay. Any further questions? All right, we want to hit wastewater.
As soon as I can find it. It moved. There it is.
Speaking of which, I will be right back.
Come on, computer. There we go. So our wastewater division is one of the divisions that is plagued with a pretty significant vacancy issue currently. I think we're down 4 of the positions. Folks are very dedicated over there. They're putting in a lot of hours. They're keeping everything going and doing well. They do a fantastic job out there. I've run 2, I've supervised the running of 2 wastewater treatment plants. I can tell you that this one is in excellent shape, especially with the portions and ages of some of the parts of it. I'm quite proud of these guys. Their department accomplishments last year was they actually got the AP American Public Works Association Project of the Year for the water reclamation facility project during the last budget. They also were involved in the Delta Newton Infrastructure Rehabilitation Project. They cleaned 60,000 feet of sewer main in 2021 and 2022. And they saved and recovered over 100 million gallons of water through the resource recovery at the facility. And they produced and beneficially used 280 metric tons of biosolids annually for farming.
That's disgusting.
Where do you think the deer go? We're just contributing to it. I mean.
But impressive. It's also impressive.
In essence, same story with this one as well. So pretty much what I said before applies here. Thank you.
So obviously the big motion is the phase 3 project in the next biennium. And then they also have a litany of lift stations and pump station improvements. Andrew just did one the other, a small part of it, punching a line under Kimball Creek just a few days ago.
So are the percentage, the ending fund balance percentage is different here?
Well, it's no. So the reserve target stays the same. 90 days basically of operating reserves. This is in excess of those 90 days that you see by the end of 2024 there. So.
Okay.
Mhm.
The disparity between total uses and ending fund balance seems a lot larger on this on this page than on the previous ones that we're looking at.
So
Catch the math, you get what you're, catch the math, you have to do, you take the ending fund balance, take out the transfers out.
I see.
So you get
Okay.
About 3.6.
Oh, okay, all right.
25% of that, is around 700,000 for the required reserve.
Math checks out.
that's awesome. Thank you. Hey, finally. Got a second employee here. Thank you. We're gonna hire you. You're hired. Yeah.
So are there larger transfers out with this particular budget than with the other ones then?
So there are definitely huge transfers out of the water. In essence, we collect all the utility fees into 401, 402, 403, those three funds. But we also have a separate capital fund and we're paying primarily for the entire kind of utility capital improvement plan with these user fees. And so that requires us to transfer the money from those three
Right,
funds,
okay.
operating funds, into that capital fund to support the work that we're intending to do over the next 2 years.
Thank you.
And the vast majority of the utility capital are waste.
Yes, yeah.
Shall we move on to engineering?
Any questions, Councilman Johnson?
No.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
That one moved too. Why are they moving around on here? So our engineering division consists of the deputy director, city engineer, and then we have three engineers that work in that department. And then we are requesting the restoration of the CIP project manager position. The CIP plan that has been approved is an aggressive plan. Currently, a lot of the daily construction checks are being completed by our engineering staff. And the restoration of that position will allow that person to take on more of that role, allowing the engineers to stay at their desks and do the engineer work. Additionally, it is my vision for that position to be our grant writer in our department. So they would be responsible for not only working with me to seek out grants, but also complete the writing and then manage those grants.
Also, in my head, there's a question. If the pace at which we are doing the CIP project, part of the CIP project, we need to be executing the projects at that pace.
I would argue yes, because the projects have been identified as a need to be completed.
I'm sorry, I'm not finding engineering in the budget. Where are we looking?
So in essence, this is a, well,
They're all over the place.
point, right? A non-utilities capital fund and utilities capital fund. So basically Fund 310 and Fund 417, it's just the way that Mike wants to organize his department. The accounting component to that hasn't quite caught up necessarily, which is why you see kind of streets and parks together. So we showed two separate tables, and here we're going to show two separate budget tables as well, Fund 310 and Fund 417.
Sometimes meetings run together. And last night's committee meeting, we talked about this very issue, this position. And, to make a long story short, we heard you. Council definitely let us know that in the past, there's been issues with getting capital projects completed on time within the year in which they were budgeted. And, Mike's given this position a nice name. I refer to it as the capital project czar. This is somebody whose job it is to be the cattle prod and the ramrod to make sure that these projects are getting done. There's also a large grant application component to it, that they'll be doing some grant applications. So, this is kind of the person who is ultimately going to take responsibility to work throughout the organization and coordinate the projects. It's not an engineer. It's more of a facilitator position. So That's really what this position is supposed to do.
Peace, so the reason that prior statement was made was, oh my gosh, this is a lot of projects. It's okay. We don't usually manage to get the projects complete on the schedule we have. It's okay. We'll work our way through it. Now it's turned around to say, oh my gosh, it's a lot of projects. And I'm really going to try to get them done. And what you've asked me to do, I need a new position to do that. So it's just, it's what I'm sorry, it's going to be a Dilbert management thing. I don't want to go on, if you've ever heard the road to Abilene. And if you had, I'm sorry. But it's where a whole family talks itself to go get ice cream and none of them really want it. Go ahead, you have your hand up and then you, Drew.
To use one of your favorite phrases, you put a steak in front of me. I am creating a plan to execute the consumption of that steak. I think that this position is a huge asset, not only just in the project supervision, the better allocation of the resources, the fact that I'll have somebody in the department that can work on grants instead of pulling an engineer off engineering work to work on a grant. But there's also a public PR facing situation. When people have questions about a project, they can call that person and get an answer because that person will know instead of being handed around the department. There are many positives to this position, and I'm not trying to spin a top or anything else. I hope that when you look at these budgets, you see that a lot of thought went into them, because believe me, a lot of thought went into them. And I'm not asking for things that I don't think will make a huge impact. Unfortunately, I wasn't here last year when the position was eliminated. I probably would have said, hold on, let's think about that before we do that. But unfortunately, I wasn't here.
No, and I'm just looking for, we do need to provide the quality services when they are needed. I just want to make sure we're doing that balance because there's a lot of, in that statement, there's a lot of check and balances that go on. But you had your hand up.
Yeah, so as a part of the overall CIP that council adopted, if you recall the CIP worksheets, they look like this for the most part. There is a row within the project budget that's labeled labor. That labor is sufficient for this position, in essence, and also the engineers that would be supporting the non-utility CIP work as well. And so we budgeted enough dollars within our CIP in order to support that position. So it's not going to compromise your construction dollars. It's not compromising your design dollars at all. We can handle that position with what we budgeted here in the CIP.
Councilman Johnson.
So in that case, would this position be funded by the same kinds of sources that fund the capital projects, the non-utility? Well, and I guess in some cases, utility
project.
Capital projects.
Well, so the non-utility, right? So in essence, this is a position specific for the non-utilities
Okay.
capital fund
Got
itself.
it.
So the real estate excise tax, they would be working on these projects, right? And therefore they can be supported by those revenue sources in
Okay.
essence. Yeah.
And with the implementation of Tyler, we will be time tracking, so they will be charging their time to the projects.
Mhm.
So let me back up and say, so that the CIP project manager, if that's the title, I can't remember the title you had. That is non-utility CIP?
It's a non-utility CIP.
But while they're working on utility projects, they would be charging their time to utility projects, correct?
Well, no, in essence, the way that we have built this into Fund 310 is this position would be funded through Fund 310, which is the non-utilities. Mhm.
Well, be careful. You can't answer no to his question, though. We do for utilities needs to be paid for by
Right,
utilities.
so if they happen to work on utility projects, that is not how we structured, right, the funding source for this position. So consequently, yes.
The actuals may be
Yep.
something different depending on how
Right.
we direct to
Mhm.
charge our time.
Normally with my engineers and this type position, they are fully budgeted somewhere in a home position, but often there are offsets throughout the year as they're working through different funding source. Or at least that's how I want it to work. Because I want my staff to charge their time to do the projects. That's not currently happening because we don't have the ability.
I realize we're running against the clock here again,
Okay.
but I would wonder if this position could be kind of split between funds like the Parks and Public Works Director is. There's some in water, there's some in sewer, there's some in stormwater. Could we have, say, I'll make up numbers, 0.8 FTE for non-utilities capital and 0.2 FTE for utilities capital, and those FTE would be funded by those.
Yeah, and that's certainly a possibility.
That way we're accounting for things.
That is a possibility. Fortunately, we've been compromised on time internally, right, to have these discussions fully. And so that's some of the dynamic in which you're probably seeing right now.
And it may be, let's get them in under this, see what the actuals come in, and then we either do a midterm or the next biennial appropriately allocate.
Yeah, we could do a budget amendment. Correct.
Mhm.
We only have so much of Drew to go around and they don't want to. Go figure out how much this person's gonna spend in the future sometime or another doing whatever.
The deep bench back here, yeah.
All right. You good?
I'm good.
All right, why don't we hold it there? Because we're
Actually, I
out of
think
time
we've been through everything.
and we'll give transition to the next committee. So unless there are objections, we are adjourned.
Adjourned.
No objections, we're adjourned.